What's up, everybody? I'm the Dorseman, and welcome back to another pixel art video. In the last episode, we created this guy. We created the imp, and today we're going to go through the steps on animating him. So the file from the last episode, you'll notice that this looks a little bit different. I originally had the fully realized thing over here, and he was a different color, and that's because I forgot to save my progress. So I had to pull up the last video and take a screenshot and then have it side by side and kind of recreate him pixel by pixel. What I did is I went through and I gave him color to all of his different components. And as you can see here, I can take away the tail. That layer is on the tail. This layer is on the leg. I wanted to get really specific and detailed with each layer so that the animation was essentially a breeze. I didn't want to take too much time in trying to pick out parts of the animation because that can create a lot of complications down the line when you're trying to animate an individual portion of him, especially when it comes to pixel art animation, because pixel art animation on a sprite this small, this guy is in a 32 by 32 field. I think maybe a 64 by 64, but that is a very small image. That is like this small on a full screen. If you were to export this guy as a PNG and then open him up, he would be that tiny. It's so tiny. Something else that's pretty important when you're animating is to get an organized setup of your layers. You want to have them all in order the way that you want them to, and by that I mean you want to have them top to bottom. As you can see here, the software that I'm using, Pixel Edit, organizes it so that the way that you have them laid out right here is how they will merge down on top of each other. So if you want something to go underneath of another thing that you have, you're going to want to place it at the bottom. Now, I don't have to worry about that too much here because none of his body parts, until I start adding the detail, are going to start overlapping over each other. But later on in the process, when I start fleshing out his actual texture, how his skin's going to look, I'm going to want to pay attention to where this is on the right-hand side over here to make sure that he's actually, proportional and all of his body parts go over the parts that they're supposed to. He ends up looking like this creature on the left. Obviously, you're going to... His hand is going to go over that portion of the wing. So I'm going to want to make sure his wings are underneath of his arms, which I don't have as of yet. His face is going to go over his chest, and his tail is going to tuck behind his one leg. So those are important bits of detail that I'm going to have to worry about later on in the process. And so it's really good to get an organized setup right away and to have it clearly labeled the way that you need it to be so that it's not something that you're going to have to scratch your head and get confused about later, which is something that I definitely do all the time. I always get all mixed up when I'm making pixel art. And here's a situation where I kind of shot myself in the foot. Because as you can see, I have the left leg layer selected, but I never went in and gave him legs throughout all the other tiles. They're all just blank. And I think originally I had thought I was going to try to give him some kind of feet animation. Like I was going to make his feet go up and down or stretch out his legs or something like that. But I think that's just a little bit too complicated for what we want to do here, which means I'm going to have to go in and, oops, there's a Control Z moment. I'm going to have to go in and do his legs. All right, now that we got that little bit out of the way, we can see now that he has all the right legs on the right leg layer and all the left legs on the left leg layer. We didn't really need to do that part in layers because, as I said, this part's really not going to be animated. But I think that it could be pretty helpful in the future as far as detailing goes or as far as moving one piece under the other. Because like I was saying, his tail is going to go kind of tucked in behind his leg as far as detailing goes. So it might be important to have that one leg on a different layer so that I can manipulate that specifically as it needs to happen. But enough of that. We're going to get right into the animation for his wings. I think that's going to be another important part to get out of the way before I start doing the arm, because the arm is probably going to be the trickiest part of all of this. It's going to need some weird things to happen here because it's going to wind up and then it's going to throw. So this right here is probably not going to be the first frame. the first frame is probably going to be his arm kind of down to his side, similar to the way that this one is. And I might accomplish that by copy pasting and making a mirror image of it just to give me a starting frame of reference. But it's going to be kind of tricky because, of course, when you wind up your arm from this point of view, you're not just lifting it and putting it back down. There's like a twist that happens on this portion of the arm, and then as you twist it around, you'll be able to see progressively more of like the back of your arm. And that's why it's very important to map all this out as kind of a stick figure or a frame of what you want to do so that you can get the movement of the arm down. And then when you go back in and detail it, you can decide whether or not you want detail for the top and bottom of the arm and where that's going to go in the process frame by frame. It's very tedious, but it's very helpful if you want your animation to look halfway decent. So I'm going to get straight into animating the wings so that all of his body will be animated except for the tricky part. Alright, so I went ahead and moved the layers around. I got his right arm below his wings now. So if we play back this animation real quick, we should be able to see that his wings go behind his arm. And they do. Yeah, you can see right there, that blue pixel passes right behind the yellow pixel. It's going to look a lot better when the arm is filled in and has a texture. But that is, it's an important step to do that when you're in the middle of doing this, so that you have all your ducks in a row and you don't have to run into weird problems later on down the line like I always do with layers. Alright, so the next thing I need to do is animate his left arm. His left arm is going to be kind of tricky because he needs to pull it in front of himself and he needs to throw the projectile up and down. That's going to be that very important telegraph to the player to let you know that he's about to attack. So he needs to throw the projectile up and down, and then he needs to wind up and throw it forward at the player. And this guy is going to be over off in the extreme left and the extreme right of the screen. So he's always going to be throwing at that angle. That helps us out a little bit. We don't have to come up with too many different point of views for the guy. All we need to do really is flip him across this axis so that he can occupy this side of the screen or this side of the screen depending on how the level design calls for him. So let's get to it. This is going to be a fun one. All right, so I have been hard at work animating this arm for a little while now. And it's taken a lot of trial and error. I'm trying to get things worked out, trying to get the kinks worked out. I needed to figure out how to get him to bring his arm down and in front of him, and he kind of flips his hand up right there. That's him throwing the projectile straight up in the air, and then down is him catching it. And then he's got to bring his hand back to starting position, which I kind of used like a cheaty thing. I just redrew his arm and his hand at sort of a neutral state, just like this side. And then I just brought it in and then rotated so the thumb's on the other side from this frame to this frame. And then I had to figure out how to make his hand look like it was kind of tilted up. It's pretty hard to see with just this small collection of pixels. But then I just copied this frame to this frame, and this frame to this frame, and this frame to this frame. So he returns back to a neutral state, and it gives me 5 frames for him to do his throwing animation, which should be pretty cut and dried. I'm thinking that he can just take this arm and get it about halfway, like halfway up in the air like this, maybe straight out with a little tiny tilt, and then this right here, this hand that I took off of the first frame, I'm probably gonna put right there. He's gonna be that's the wind up, and then the throw should happen in a pretty snappy way. So I might go straight from this frame to his arm straight out in front of him like that, like he just threw it, and then it's going to return to normal, or there might be just one extra frame right there, and then this is going to be another intermediary one, and this one is going to go back to his normal arm right there. That's going to be the wind up thing. That's him flipping his arm in front of him. You can ignore the last few cells of animation there. Obviously there he goes. He kind of moves his arm in front of him, and it flips up in the air. I can imagine a projectile kind of shooting up right there. They're just real quick, just up and down. So that's what I got so far. I'm going to set to work on the rest of the arm, and we'll see how it looks in a little bit. All right, so I've finished the arm. I finished the throw at least, and I think it's starting to look pretty good. It's definitely going to need some polishing, but I got the basic animation down. If you look here, I got him. He comes across, he throws it. He comes across, he tosses it for a second, then he winds up and he throws. It's real quick. It's real snappy. You get that little bit of a telegraph. You just get that little bit of a flip and then throw. So all I got to do is get a little bit of a projectile in there, and I'll probably just get like a stand-in projectile, just a tiny little brightly colored ball that's a different color than the rest of them, maybe a bright blue or something, just as a stand-in for the projectile, and then I'll come back and I'll tweak the projectile. Or we may just do a projectile in-game, because the projectile that we have for the player character is actually done in Unity because we wanted it to actually emit light, versus just a stand-in sprite that looks like it's emitting light. We wanted it to actually emit light on the screen, because we're going to have different parts of the game where the character is in the dark, and we want to still be able to see the projectile and have it look very magical. So I'm going to go ahead and throw in that projectile to see how it's looking, and then we'll throw together the rest of the pieces to see how the animation's doing. Save. All right, folks, moment of truth. I put the layers underneath of what they need to be underneath of. Everything should be lined up right. And I threw a little projectile in there, just a little black outline. Let's see how it looks, shall we? All right. There it goes. He's throwing it up in the air and he's catching it and he's tossing it. I know it's kind of hard to see, but his arm is going over top of the wing and over top of the tail. And like I said before, when we get a little texture and we flesh him out, he should be good to go. I think that's a pretty decent animation. All right, so this is all of the coloration finished. This is the entire animation done. And here you can see him. He throws the ball up in the air and then he throws it. That's perfect. He's looking good. We got the wings animated here. All of the layers are on top of everything they need to be on top of. And we got just a little bit of arm twitching right there. It's kind of like he's supposed to be rotating. I didn't do any kind of animation on the torso, so it doesn't really look like he's rotating. And not 100% in love with this coloration I got going on down here. I just wanted to make the torso, the legs, and the feet a different color from the arm right there, so that you can clearly see what he's trying to do. So when the arm passes over, you can see the arm like throw. You can see that sharp movement down right across his body, and it doesn't blend in with any of the other colors right here. The tail, that's fine. It can be the same color as the border, and it can be the same color as the wings because it doesn't intersect with any of them, and it passes behind them. Just like the wings here. The wings pass down and behind the legs, so you don't really have to worry about them blending in with anything. So that was the reasoning behind that. Another technique you can use is to use a hard border, a hard outline. You could use like a harsh black outline around his entire body in order to differentiate the different limbs and to more clearly see the animation. But since he's such a small guy, Like that's about how big he's going to be on the game screen, or maybe even like right there. So you're barely going to see him, but even from back here, you can clearly see his arm move across his body to throw that thing. So I figure I can get away with it because he's so small, and you can really just see the color. He's going to be somewhere in between here and here on the game screen. So, and of course, even though it's a pixel art game, he's going to be rendered in HD, so you're not really going to notice it too much. So I'm not going to agonize too much over the colors and the details like that. I think we got something pretty good here, and I think it's going to work really well for the game. Especially since, like I've said before, this game is just kind of a practice run for us. It's something that we just want to get finished and completed so that we can have experience in seeing a project through from inception to finished product. And then the next project we work on, we want to dive into a little bit more thoroughly and get all the details polished off and whatnot. But here we are. Here he is. He's all finished. So that's all I got for you guys today. Next video, I'm going to be working on our first level boss. So it's going to be pretty big. I might have to cut that up into a few parts, because of course I have to completely design the character and I have to design the environment that he's around, but hopefully it's going to go really well. Thank you everybody so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.